Hey, what's up, folks? This is kind of a special little, not an episode, but a little snippet for you guys. I wanted to do a special shout out and promotion for a former guest of the podcast, Chris Haley. He joined us in 2023 for a special Juneteenth episode. I think that was actually episode 278. You should check it out. Make a podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I don't think we have that episode up on YouTube just yet, but please do check it out. If you didn't know, if you didn't listen to the episode, Chris Haley is the nephew of the world-renowned author of Roots, Alex Haley. And Chris is actually, and Chris, I'm going to say Chris, don't think of Chris Barkley, co-host of the Make It podcast, still talking about Chris Haley. He's the research director of the Legacy of Slavery in Maryland. And he's also the co-director of the film Unmarked, about the neglected African-American burial sites in the American South. That film is now playing on Apple TV and Amazon Prime Video. But today, I'm giving him a special shout out because we're recognizing a new achievement in Chris's career. He's got a new book of poetry out. If you didn't know, he's also an author. He's got several other books out as well. But his new book of poetry is entitled When Did I Know I Was Black? And it is now available on Amazon. In a second, I'm going to step aside and let him go ahead and recite one of the poems by his selection himself. But I'd like to give just a little bit of kind of personal context to this book, When Did I Know I Was Black? And also to the poem that he's gonna read. Now, the poem that he's going to recite has nothing to do with my personal experience, but I feel like there's that connection, which is why it's kind of exciting to talk about this from the perspective of me and the Make It podcast. So it's kind of funny thinking about this idea of when did I know I was black? Because I often refer to myself as just African American, right? Even though, yeah, people are going to say, well, yeah, you're black, you're a black guy. Yeah, true in kind of that social context sense. But my race is African American. And this idea of knowing when you're black or realizing you're black, I think for me, that really reminds me of like when I was in middle school and a bunch of my friends and my white friends would say to me, it's like, Nick, you don't act black. I'm like, well, what does that even mean? And they would point to somebody else. I'm like, act like that. You don't act like that. And I was like, well, what does this mean? But I am black, right? Because by virtue of being African American, I'm black, right? No, that's not the case, at least not in my experience. I think those times in my life when I realize or when I know that I'm black is really when I'm being compared to a stereotype of what African American behavior is, and maybe even being looked at under a different connotation of blackness. When I look up, and I've done this before at different times in my life, you kind of look up the definition of like, what is black? What does black mean? And obviously it's going to be related to, African Americans and people with dark skin. But also if you keep looking and you look at the definition of black, it says reflecting or transmitting little or no light. Another definition is thoroughly sinister or evil, or indicative of condemnation or discredit. And I think that's how I connect with that title of when did I know I was black? I think it's when I feel that being an African American is or has the connotation of being black as defined by Webster in the ways that I just defined it. When I feel that someone's looking at me in that way, or someone refers to me as black because they're thinking about those things, that's when I realize I'm black. So again, I thought it was a really interesting title that Chris chose. Again, Chris Haley. And I thought it was worth mentioning and shouting him out. Again, there's a personal connection between me, his book, and his poetry. Personal connection as, again, Chris Haley, past guest of the podcast. But also, as we've told every guest that we've ever had, hey, we're all about supporting our community, giving back in any way that we can. And when you do something great, like distribute a book, even just let's just say write a book, of poetry or otherwise, we're here to shout you out. So with that, I'll step back and step aside, if you will, and let Chris Haley, the author of the book, When Did I Know I Was Black, that is now available on Amazon, I'll let him go ahead and recite one of his poems for you.
Pinocchio. I'm angry and black. You're racist and white. I'm tired of these memes, but if I may be bold, I'm sick also of your claiming Dr. King's dream as your bigot-free code. You would have hated him. And Jesus, too. He was poor and Middle Eastern, lest you forget. They both wanted the rich to give to the poor. You would have seated them side by side on a boat named Liberal Threat. Tell me that I'm lying. Tell me their positions are those you share. I'll stand here watching as your nostrils flare and your snout grows. The nose knows, Pinocchio.